as a believer, my identity is not tied to circumstance. That's probably the only way that I can maintain confidence. Now, keeping that at the forefront daily is challenging. And so if I was going to give a practical, it would be the abundance versus scarcity. And that's both internal and external abundance, that I'm both enough and that enough exists in the world to meet whatever the needs that I'm going to have. And I think as believers, I take that as, again, take all things in thanksgiving. The circumstance does not define or dictate how I feel about it. And if I can choose to see all things as working for my good, that's the easiest way that I found.
Welcome to the Exceptional Companies Podcast, a podcast for purpose-led entrepreneurs looking to master the art of buying, selling, or optimizing small businesses. Your host, Chris Seegers, founder of Exceptional Companies and author of Selling Main Street, has over a decade of experience starting, buying, and leading successful businesses. He's here to guide you through the complex world of business transactions and growth. Each week, we dive deep with actionable insights, expert interviews, and real-world strategies to activate and equip you to live exceptionally and build exceptional businesses. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Here's your host, Chris Seegers.
Welcome to the Exceptional Companies Podcast, where we discuss how to buy, sell, or optimize your business. I'm joined by a recurring guest and dear friend of mine, Greg Wiggins. Greg, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here.
Man, we get together at least once a month to chat about life issues, business issues, family issues. Really appreciate your counsel. I like to just start with some of the things that I love about my guests. Dude, you are the guy that you call when you're stuck in a Mexican prison and there's no way out. And you aren't even going to ask questions. You're just going to say, okay, I'm coming. So for our listeners, Greg is a business owner in multiple industries. He's always innovating. That's one of the reasons I call him a lot, is when I have a problem, we can just chat about it and usually come up with a solution. He's a professional problem solver, and he applies that to a bunch of different businesses. But the topic that came up, and it's come up in just a lot of my circles, is what is 2025 going to look like? What is this election going to lead to? And really, how do we build and sustain momentum going into 2025? And so I want to dig into that because we've had a lot of conversations with our team members at our businesses, with some of the clients that we have on the buy and sell side that are concerned about where we're going as a country and saying, hey, we're just going to wait. And so anyways, we wanted to chat about this topic because I don't think waiting is the solution. But Greg, what advice would you give our listeners, or what are some of the things you're going to be doing as we head into 2025? We've got kind of a little bit of the last quarter of 2024, but what are you thinking as we start going into a new year?
Well, that is a great question. I think the popular feedback is don't take your foot off the pedal, lean in when others are leaning out. I think that's true to an extent. Me personally, as I end 24 and look to build momentum in 25, I'm going to be people focused. And where that plays in for me is, where can I lean into my personal network and be curious about the people currently in my network? And then where can I work to develop new relationships to expand my network heading into 2025? So think of it concentric rings. Chris, you're in that inner ring for me. That's not going to change much, but I think oftentimes those personal, we were talking offline beforehand, we haven't communicated enough personally because we've been so focused on other areas of our life. This is a point in time in which the holidays for certain people aren't necessarily great times of the year. And I think developing and leaning into the personal aspect of the professional community pays huge dividends down the road, not only professionally, but more important, personally. So that's where I'm going to focus.
Yeah. And we had talked a little bit about that, is building a tribe of good people around you. And if you don't have one, get one. There's a way to do it. There's all kinds of systems and processes to do it, but find a few people that you can have authenticity, vulnerability, and accountability with. And the way you get that is you give that. The way you and I built our friendship is we just started talking about stuff that I wouldn't have shared with most people. And then you started sharing some stuff. And then we start, hey, let's talk about our marriage face to face. Let's talk about how we're raising our kids. Hey, when business isn't working, let's talk about that. So I think just having that accountability, vulnerability, and a tribe that you can call. And I think hopefully that tribe gives you good counsel. One of the things that I've just been advising folks, and I don't think many people are taking my counsel on this, but is, hey, stop. Don't even look at the election anymore. Do your early voting, do your mail-in ballot, and then focus on the things you can control. Because across the board, whether it be in our business or in the church or in our friend network, all people are talking about the election. The reality is national politics is not going to change that much about how you operate your day. Now, we should still be active in that, but we shouldn't be concerned about it. And you and I are both people of faith, and the Bible talks a lot about not worrying about tomorrow. And that's hard to do because life is stressful. But the reality is, if we're controlling the controllables, and we're releasing the future outcome, which is what it is anyways, we can't control a lot of the outcomes anyways, then we should be at peace. And so I was reading in Philippians 4, and what was interesting is it says, bring everything with prayer and supplication and thanksgiving. And then the next part is a really famous that says, think about these things. Think about love, joy, peace, patience, right? Like all the beautiful things. And so I think that gave me some thought processes or mental models. Number one is, whether you're a person of faith or not, you can meditate or pray over Thanksgiving. Are you starting with, hey, thanks for us living in a great country where we have freedom to vote and freedom of speech and freedom to do business as we want to? And then once you start with that thankfulness, instead of focusing on all the negative stuff, the media is toxic. I mean, I think everybody should delete news off their phones. I read it maybe once a day, once every 2 days, just to make sure I'm informed, and that's it. But the next piece was, okay, so don't focus on the negative, focus on these wonderful things. Whatever is good, whatever is lovely, think about those things. And those are the relationships. Those are the blessings in your life. And that tags into, you and I have talked about this in previous podcasts, but confidence. So as an entrepreneur or a leader, you don't have to be a business owner. You could be a leader in your house. You could be a leader in your church, wherever, in your neighborhood. Protecting your confidence is key. So Greg, what do you think about that piece? Because I think going into 2025, people have a lack of confidence in a lot of things, and maybe including themselves.
First off, as a believer, my identity is not tied to circumstance. That's probably the only way that I can maintain confidence. Now, keeping that at the forefront daily is challenging. And so if I was going to give a practical, it would be the abundance versus scarcity. And that's both internal and external abundance, that I'm both enough and that enough exists in the world to meet whatever the needs that I'm going to have. And I think as believers, I take that as, again, to take all things in thanksgiving. The circumstance does not define or dictate how I feel about it. And if I can choose to see all things as working for my good, that's the easiest way that I found. I don't know if you've got a different way, if you've got a tactical or a very strategic way of viewing that, but from a 10,000 foot view, I find that's the easiest way for me.
I love it, man. And I think when you aren't confident, you make bad decisions. And so generally when something bad happens in the business, it could be we're getting sued, it could be we just lost a key employee, it could be a deal fell through, which is all three of those have happened to us. If I allow that situation to just germinate right in my mind, man, this is a recurring theme. Well, what if we get sued every 2 years and what if we lose a business? What if we go bankrupt? What if we lose a home? So protecting the confidence, if I can stop that negative pathway, right? And sometimes it is playing out the worst case scenario and just being like, well, it's really not that bad, honestly. So protecting your confidence might be eliminating that negative pathway. And then the second tool that we've used is really just writing out the things that are going well in your life. And it may be going back a quarter, it may be going back 6 months, and you might have to go back 2 or 3 years. So write out a list of all the things that are working. And then also next steps on how to improve that. So if it's, hey, we bought a business, the cash flow is not that great, but we bought a business, right? And then it's, okay, well, what am I going to do the next 90 days to improve that cash flow? Okay, cool. And then that leads to some sort of decisive action. So it's immediately like reframing that psychology, right? So getting thankful, getting grateful. Then when you have that positive momentum, trying to shorten that gap to the action. So it's like, all right, now I'm like, hey, you know what? It's going to be okay. God's got us. We've been here before. Okay, then it's, what do I do tomorrow or today or like right now? What can I do right now? Well, I'm going to call this person and deal with this situation head on. So I think that helps you because then you're doing something to solve the problem. So you've reframed your negative into positive. And then instead of just saying, hey, I'm just going to be positive, you're like, I'm actually going to take some decisive action to create a better life or a better outcome. So I love that, man.
Did you say shorten the gap to the action? Yeah,
shorten the gap to the action. So the book Selling Main Street that I released earlier this year, I'm working on the second book, Buying Main Street, which is how to buy a Main Street business. And that's one of the mental models that I think is successful entrepreneurs bring. So I tell this story that's a real life story. I changed the names, but basically about this female acquisition entrepreneur and this male acquisition entrepreneur, both brilliant, both well capitalized, both looking for a business. And I coached both of them. One had a really successful outcome and one didn't. And the only difference was that the female acquisition entrepreneur shortened the gap between any counsel she got, whether it be from me or any other person, and the time between she actioned that counsel, right? So she shortened that gap to the action. That was the only thing that changed. So that other guy's still looking for a business 2.5 years later. She's now been running a business for 18 months, which is now stabilized, throwing off cash flow. And so that became a mental model that I saw, that I took from them. I was like, wow, what changed? Like, what was the difference? Because they're both brilliant, both had the right models, both had the right counsel. One was successful and one wasn't. And I was like, really, the only thing that was different is she just shortened that gap. She was like, oh, sweet, I'm going to start sending LOIs tomorrow. I'm like, cool. And then she would do it, right? The other guy would be like, well, I need to get the LOI. I need to get the terms right. And I need to get this right. And I need to get that right. By the time he actually sent the letter of intent, that deal was already under contract. So anyways, I could go a long ways down in that, but shortening the time to the action, I think, is critical as we go into 2025. So let's recap a little bit. Building the right people around you, like you said, really dialing in your relationships and going deep. That's something that we've done personally. We said, hey, let's actually shrink our circle even more. Yeah. I want to spend a lot less time with more people and a lot more time with a lot less people. So like shrinking that, hey, we're not going to go to this dinner party that is folks that really we're not looking to invest in, and vice versa. We're going to invite people into our home that we're like, hey, how do we do this a lot more intimately? So invest in your people and then protect your confidence. So there's a couple tricks and tips for that. And then how do you shorten that gap between kind of building that confidence, getting an idea of what to do, and then actioning it? So what else, man? What are some of the themes as you think about 2025? And I'll give you an example. God has given me kind of like a word over a lot of years. And sometimes that might be, hey, this is the year of the harvest, or this is the year where you plant, or this is the year that's going to be really difficult relationships. What are some themes you see going into 2025? Could be personal themes, or it could be, national or business, or, just things you'd like to share with our audience.
You mentioned it earlier, and it was about planning and it was about unplugging. And I think analog planning with digital execution, I'm going to speak about me personally. If I don't unplug and take a step back, I don't allow myself the space to be creative and to think strategically. I have to unplug. That's just a me thing. So taking the time to think in quiet. And a lot of times that's the sharpening of the axe before you start cutting the tree. You feel like you're wasting time. But if you will commit, and I'm talking to myself here, if I will commit to planning where I'm not burdened by alerts and technology and everything else, I mean, I see a multiple return on that time investment. That would be one thing. And then secondly, you mentioned another thing, and that's vulnerability and authenticity. The fastest path to yes is oftentimes, and I don't know, with people that you don't know, that you're worried about, how's this going to look? Here's the secret. Nobody has it figured out, and nobody has an understanding of what's to come. People want to do business with people that they trust and that they understand. And if you as an entrepreneur are willing to get uncomfortable and pull up the skirt just a little bit to say, like, I don't know what this looks like. What do you think? If you're intellectually curious and authentic, I think it's going to pay off significantly, a lot faster than you think.
I love that. So unplugging and then establishing vulnerability, you think, is that a personal theme for you, or you just think that's a good theme for folks in general?
Both. The only thing I can act on is what I think personally is going to work. So for anybody that's of medium intelligence and gifting, that's a good way to go about it.
I love it. One of the themes that I've been seeing and also articulating and trying to encourage is get off the sidelines and put it in play. So since COVID, I think people, myself included, have not realized we've been going maybe at 50% or 60% throttle, and we haven't been engaged how we should be. And it's kind of like, well, let's see how, like, what's the new economy going to look like? What's the new political landscape going to look like? Like, what's all this international stuff happening? How's that going to play out in, economics or gas prices or whatever? And instead of just saying, you know what, who knows, but this has all been happening over the past thousands of years, recurring, right? These are cycles that everybody's seen. So it's going to happen. It's going to continue to happen. We got to get off the sidelines and put it into play. One of my greatest mentors, man, it was such simple advice, but he kept giving it to me time and time again. I'd be like, hey, how do you build a great life? Or how do you build a great marriage? How do I increase my faith? How do I get better at business? And he'd always just say, dude, put it into practice, put it into practice, put it into practice, put it into practice. And so I've been encouraging people, like, whatever the goal is for 2025, first of all, I hope you have kind of the BHAG, Jim Collins, big, hairy, audacious goal. I hope you're dreaming big, big dreams. But then when you have one, man, put it into practice, whatever that might be, because it's time to get off the sidelines. No one's coming to save us. The government's not coming to save us. The economy's not coming to save us. We have to work on saving ourselves. And I don't mean that spiritually, right? There's only one Savior, and I want to give him all credit and all glory, but we have our part to play. And I think as human beings, we have not put that into play the past 3 years. And that's why we've seen a little more suffering, especially in our country, than we probably needed to see.
Amen to both of that. I got one more point, and it's one
Yeah.
that you counseled me. So for the listeners, Chris and I will often ask each other very hard questions. And a question that we've asked each other recently was, where do you see the flaw or the gap in my day-to-day? And your counsel to me that I think is very good counsel for other people, just because of how easy it is. We've got access to so much information and opportunity, is that those that win focus and commit. And that could be committing to 2 weeks, 2 months, or 2 years. That the jumping around from opportunity to opportunity prevents really gifted people from realizing success, however it's defined for them. That take the time to get really specific about what you want to do and where you want to go and commit to it for a period of time before you chase whatever that next shiny thing is.
Do you like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss an episode by clicking the subscribe button now and check out our website, www.excoadvisors.com. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now, back to the show.
So there's a story. One of my great friends who you'll have to meet is a guy named Nathan Moody. He's been on the podcast. Brilliant entrepreneur. He's like genius, probably one of the top scientists in the US. And he does ultra marathons and all kinds of crazy running. Like, the guy's halfway insane to do all these things. So he did that. Oh, man, I'm not a runner, but he did a really long race. And anybody who that's a runner would know what I'm talking about. But anyways, it's
probably
one
like
of those
the Western
races.
States or something.
Yeah, it was something crazy. And he came back and I was like, man, I can't even imagine going to that distance. What did you learn, right? Because your body goes through all these successions of failure. It's like, okay, 10 miles in, 20 miles in, 30 miles in. I think it was like 100 miles or something, right? And he said, I realized that we kind of have a through line. And he said, I wanted our through line to be something physical where we commit to staying in a location longer. And so they live in Springs with us. And he said, I just felt like it was a word to say, you and your family, not just him, but his parents, his grandparents, we've moved a lot as a society. And he said, no more. This is your land and you need to commit to it. And how you're going to build relationships, business, good marriage, good friendships for your kids, stability for your kids, and generational wealth, or whatever your goal is to stay in it and keep practicing in it. And that's a theme that I've been hearing a lot, is even COVID, right? So COVID was a great mover. People moved all over the country. They're like, hey, there's greener grass over here. It's red states, or it's better quality of life, or it's this, or it's that. And so I think another theme could be, are you in the place you need to be? And if so, go deep. Go deep in everything you do. Know your neighborhood. Know how to love your neighborhood well. Know your city. Know how to love your city well. Know your church. Know your business. You can do that so much better when you're physically in a place for a long period of time. So that's one I hope that people commit to in some form or fashion, because we've found some of the saddest lessons I've learned is, man, when we move, we lose so much value, mainly in relational value. We have so many great friends in Texas that we don't see anymore that I'm like, man, shoot, I miss that. And I don't want to redo that every time, right? I want to have people that we're here and we're going to be here, and our kids have that security knowing hey, we're going to build friendships in fifth grade that are going to go with us into college or after college. Because I didn't have that growing up. We moved almost every couple of years. That's awesome, man. We just went to a really incredible conference on giving, basically how to be better givers as business owners, as whoever, professionals. It was really interesting, some of the themes that came out of that. So there was a big split between millennials and baby boomers and how we see the world and how they acted and how millennials are going to act. And I think even going into 2025, it's really interesting to see, millennials are realizing, hey, we've got to step into positions of leadership. And no one's waiting for us. No one is handing off the baton and saying, here you go, you're going to be mayor now, or you're going to be city council, or you're going to be in charge of the church, or you're going to be in charge of the whatever, right? Like there's no handoff. So I think that's going to be another shift that's going to come pretty heavy in 2025. We've seen this in the business acquisition and divestiture side. I think there's going to be more businesses sold in 2025 than ever. There's so many people that are waiting on the election. And I'm like, why? That will not change your business at all. The valuation is going to be the same. I mean, it's not like you're going to be like, oh, I'm going to invest a ton more into marketing dollars after the election, depending on what's going to happen. You're probably going to do the same thing. So what are some other themes, man, that have come up, or some other thoughts that you have for our audience going into 2025? Because I think it is kind of a pretty big transition.
I just want to reiterate, nobody has it figured out. And you need to quit waiting for permission. If you feel convicted, pursue the things that move you, that align with your business goals. So maybe you don't know what your business goals are. Take the time to set a very clear picture. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things I got from you is getting very clear on what matters and what drives you both professionally and personally. And if you think there's an opportunity, go. If you get sued, you never know that maybe the conversation with the attorney, by being curious and by being bold, takes you in a direction that you didn't know that you were going to go. Be curious, be bold, and be flexible. That stuff changes so fast these days that those
really
that can pivot and be as flexible, that can be flexible in the right ways, I think are going to really, really come into their own next year and in the next few years, just because the pace of change is increasing so quickly.
Yep. I love it, man. I think that flexibility is so critical. And going back to your point on being quiet, because I want to hit this again, because I don't think people give it enough credit. So I want to tell a little story. Just last month, we finished all of our quarterly planning for all the businesses. And it's a chaotic time for me because I have to fly out to different places and really facilitate these things. And it's pretty draining. It's a lot of fun too, but it's just a lot. We're creating a quarterly plan. We're doing some light annual planning for next year. And so I came out of that and I really felt like, man, I was like, this plan wasn't that good. I'm like, man, I feel like, yeah, we've got some good action items, but I didn't really generate the things that are going to be the most critical to our businesses. And so I was like, okay, what happened? And the reality was I didn't have any time to be quiet and think. And so this week I've been time blocking, and I have for, most of my career. And so I just set a time block, just thinking time, right? I just am like, hey, that's what I put on my calendar. It's thinking time. And so I sat and I just thought, and I started with that gratitude. Hey, what are the great things? Trying to get into this positive frame, boom, 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 boom. And then all of a sudden, then your mind starts working, right? And I'm not giving it a problem to solve. I'm just thinking. And through that quiet time, I realized we have to start a lead company, because one of the biggest problems we're trying to solve for every single one of our businesses is client acquisition and, client cost, and our leads are too expensive and the marketing's too expensive. Our lead sources are not creating quality leads. It's a problem across every one of our businesses and industries. These lead companies are going away because they're selling bad data. I mean, there's just so many problems with it. And so as I'm thinking through this, I was like, wait a second, the amount of money we're spending on this, we could actually buy a lead company. We could take our marketing budget for one of our businesses, and if we could find a healthy lead company, that amount per month is actually less than the cost it would cost to buy that company if we were paying for the debt. And so it was just like, okay. And then of course my partners were just like, God, we can't start another company. I'm like, hold on a second. We already are doing these things, right? We're already trying to solve this problem on the lead side for us. So let's just start building the solutions for ourselves. And then once we kind of figure out that solution, we're already paying for it. Then we can decide, do we want to stand this up as a standalone revenue generating business? Or is it just something we're doing to basically drop an expense to a profit? So that literally, that was 30 minutes of quiet time to be like, oh, this is the throughput of all the problems we have in all of our businesses, that if we solve this, this would be millions of dollars of value over the next 10 years. So I would really encourage our listeners just to take that quiet time with no agenda. And I'm a big binary guy. Like, it's got to be pencil and paper. And there's a ton of studies, you can research it. But when we do our planning, even, I'm like, I usually print out our 2-page business plans and the way that we structured our 90-day action, our 1-page life plan, our clarity. I print them off. And my younger brothers, our partners there, I was like, you're such a boomer. And I'm like, look, man, there's something that comes from not having my phone, my iPad, my computer, just having a piece of paper and ideating on it, right? Like, we're just going to come up with ideas and ideas and ideas. And I'm not looking at my email and this thing's not popping up and that thing's, it's just like having that space, man. So I appreciate you bringing that up. What else, brother? What else is on your heart or head that you think would support our listeners as we go into 2025?
That's a really good question. Platform businesses have been on my mind recently. And that's how can you get a business or a customer from A to B? That could be from one solution to a next. You mentioned lead businesses. That's a perfect platform business. That's connecting buyers and sellers. That's giving granular detail to business owners or business professionals. I don't know exactly what that looks like. Helping people solve problems, you're never going to go broke helping people solve problems. Doing it in a way that's systematic, that you can replicate either by approach or execution, that's where you guys really excel. And it's not just because you're a buddy, but I truly believe you guys are world-class in systematizing approach so that when you find outcomes that are wins, they're repeatable.
Yep, I love
Platforms doesn't tie to that, but platform businesses and focusing on systems.
Yeah, for sure. And I would add into that, I mean, this is more business specific, but I just met with a guy that we facilitated a transaction for. He bought a transportation and courier business, and his head is just right in the right space. He's 90 days in. He's like, I'm not changing anything, but I'm starting to capture all the ideas and issues that we need to solve. But he's like, I also am seeing, just like we were doing, hey, there's these things in our P&L that are substantial costs that we pay somebody, and they actually make sense for us to own that piece of the business. So what if we added that as a service to our company? And I'm like, man, that's amazing. So I think take some quiet time going into 2025, maintain your confidence, surround yourself with a tribe. And I think that 2025 is going to be the most incredible year. I mean, I say that every year, but I really do believe there's going to be a lot of people that are getting unstuck. And I think that's really exciting for us to see.
One last thing, and it goes back to the networking. Find 5 people that you want to connect with, and then find 2 or 3 ways that you can add value to that person. And in a cold outreach, give value without expecting anything back. And I promise you, you'll be amazed at how quickly you uncover things that you didn't think about, that you grow your network. It's just find ways to add value to people that you want to connect with.
Yep, I love it. And I'll end with this final comment. Put it into practice. Whatever you're doing, put it into play. Don't wait. Don't think about it. No paralysis analysis going into 2025. Put it into play. Greg,
Shorten the gap.
I love it. Shorten the gap between an idea and the action, man. And I'm sure that came from somebody else. So if I plagiarized, I apologize, but that's pretty much all ideas these days. Man, thank you, Greg, for joining me. Appreciate the time as always, man. Blessings on you and your family, and we'll catch up soon.
Love you, Bob.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Exceptional Companies Podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or via RSS so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. If you liked this show, please reach out through our website, www.excoadvisors.com, for free tools to order a copy of Selling Main Street, or to sign up for our free webinar on how to sell your Main Street business.